For the moment, thank you very much. And they're questions that I can pose to Nick Smith now because he joins me on the line. And Nick is the Director of Racing and Public Affairs at the Royal Racecourse. Nick, good morning to you.
Good morning, everyone.
Some fascinating questions thrown up by the prospect that Ascot will take place in its original dates, even though racing's only starting on June the 1st. Just talk us through the mindset at Ascot at the moment.
Yeah, very positive. Obviously it's great that racing is looking to resume now on the 1st of June. Fantastic that we have an opening programme schedule. Racecourses named, and probably most importantly from our point of view, what looks like a pretty credible opening pattern for the first first week or so.
Just talk to me about the race programme at Royal Ascot. If the meeting does go ahead and we do start on the 1st of June as the roadmap suggests, is every single race at Royal Ascot going to be run as we would expect it to be?
Well, that's a very good question, and it's still up in the air. I mean, I would imagine that we would try with the BHA to have as few fundamental changes as possible. Certainly all the Group 1s will be run, and the plan at the moment is to run all the races, including the two-year-old races. But of course, the order of running will change probably quite a bit more than we might have thought might be necessary at one point to make sure that the programme that we put on complements as best as possible the Guineas meeting and the Derby meeting. Oh, and the trials that run into it, of course.
I want to talk about the two-year-olds in a little bit of depth in a moment, but let's talk about internationals first of all, because it's been a huge area for you over the years and a huge boost to the meeting. What is the extent of international participation that you're anticipating at Ascot from the phone calls that you've had this week?
Well, again, good question, and again, to a certain extent, we're all slightly feeling in the dark. It's very good news, obviously, that international horses, in the context of talking about, in the first place, being Europeans, will be allowed to run in the Group 1 races at Newmarket, the Coronation Cup and the two Guineas races. I mean, that's really important to the credibility of the pattern, the credibility of the classics and what have you. So that'll sort of roll into Royal Ascot. We certainly expect a good Irish participation, hopefully French participation as well. Great news that Andre Fabre's looking to bring that horse over to the 2000 Guineas. That's a real boost. So that's fantastic. That on his mind is the possibility of coming into Britain. Of course, all of this is predicated on what the actual governmental rules are with regards to getting people in and out of the various countries within Europe. It looks like Ireland will be reasonably straightforward, touch wood. France might be slightly more complicated if the human quarantine is imposed. But, there are ways around these things.
What about runners, for example, from the United States? Obviously, Wesley Ward would want to bring two-year-olds. Is that feasible?
It's feasible at the moment. We've said to Wesley, really, he has to deal with his shippers. He has to deal with, the logistics of getting out of America and landing with horses in Great Britain. But that being the case, there is no reason why he should be treated any different to anyone coming from, say, France. It is, of course, possible that staff quarantine restriction, which has been mooted about as being up to 2 weeks, could be a real problem. He's aware of that, but there are, I suppose, options to stable these horses with other trainers and use their staff. I mean, it's complicated. I mean, I don't need to tell you that. I mean, these things are extremely complicated. I mean, we're not standing in the way, but I think the difference in tone this year, very different sort of scenario, is whereas previously, you're on the phone every day to Australia, Japan, Hong Kong, America, chatting away on details, hopefully trying to encourage those who are teetering on the brink of making a decision to come. We stepped back from that. Really, because whilst we would like them to come, the obstacles that they're going to face are so complicated that it's probably not appropriate to be proactively selling the venture per se. So, we want them there, whether that's America, France, Ireland, Germany, whatever. Of course, we want them there, but I think this is a year to perhaps take a step back from being so proactively involved in trying to make those ventures happen.
In addition, if you did have international participation, would you anticipate some pushback, both from a public relations point of view and from some domestic trainers who are trying to get their horses a run?
Well, I think the qualifying criteria we're talking about the two-year-olds here, aren't we, really? Because the others, you're going to get a run if you run at St James's Palace or something like that. There possibly could be, but I think we have to remember that Wesley would probably have one horse in maybe 2 or 3 of the races. That's not going to be a pivotal difference to the meeting. And don't forget that other race meetings, up until recently, have been open to our horses. I mean, we've had horses out in Australia during this crisis period running over there, theoretically in place of other horses, although the cut didn't come into play. So, you can apply the same argument, and I think the same argument probably will be applied by some people to Irish and French horses. But the key to the pattern is international competition. It's a ground rule effectively that these races are open, and whilst you could close them, we are quite lucky. We have the ability to put vast fields on the track. So if you've got up to 30 horses running, most of the ones you'd want to see run, you would hope would be getting in.
Nick, let's just talk about these 2-year-old qualifications, which are unusual, obviously, because we're in unusual circumstances. The idea at the moment is that preference is given to winners. If they can win in that first week, and they'd have a couple of weeks then to get to Ascot, then second-placed horses, third-placed horses, fourth-placed horses, then unraced horses, then horses who haven't been placed, which all makes sense. But in order for horses to get a run in the first week, clearly there's going to be an awful lot of competition, and the BHA have stipulated that trainers who have had the most runners at Royal Ascot in the last 3 years will be subject to preferential treatment as regards horses they choose not to be balloted out of races that may then qualify them for Royal Ascot during the first week of the resumption, as you can see there. My question to you is, do you think, given that 2-year-old races are where theoretically anyone's got a chance, and they're not just the preserve of the Ballydoyles and the John Gosdens and so forth, that's really a fair way of administering a ballot system?
Well, the ballot system obviously is one that has been put in place by the BHA, so we haven't been part of that process. But I would say that it's as fair a method as anything. And the fact that they're looking to, possibly divide 2-year-old races in the coming, the opening days and weeks into 2 races and potentially 3 races to make sure that as many horses as possible do get a chance to run. I think they're doing as much as they possibly can, to be quite honest. And, I think with regards to the 2-year-old races, it would be lovely to think perhaps that, that there was some kind of, glamour there, that they were the races for the small trainers or what have you. And they are from time to time, of course, and that's great. But I think actually realistically, the top races are usually won by the superpowers.
Yes, I think possibly the distinction to draw is that how many runners you have had in the 2-year-old races at Royal Ascot doesn't necessarily mean how much success you've had in the 2-year-old races at Royal Ascot.
True. But, 6 races, theoretically 30 in each, 180 opportunities. It's a pretty good opportunity.
So, Nick, would your view be that it's an unusual year and you've just got to try and come up with a method, however odd that method may seem, to get 2-year-olds there having won races, essentially, so you've got at least some kind of representative field?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. It's, as you rightly say, it's an unusual year. The order of running isn't going to be the same. We're going to be looking at making sure horses that can run in the Guineas obviously have the maximum amount of time possible between the Guineas and St James's Palace coronation. So I think we've all got to sort of accept that, it's going to be that kind of year until hopefully, all being well, and potentially sooner than people might expect, if we can get up and running on the 1st of June, we can get back into something more like normality in terms of, well, it will never be normal because it'll be extremely quiet, but in terms of the race planning and the pattern, we will be, we should be able to get back on track. A lot of work's been done to make sure that we minimise the congestion in the pattern and we get back to a normal sort of schedule as soon as possible. And with that in mind, there are going to be, unfortunately, areas where, some people are going to be slightly disappointed, and I feel for them hugely, of course, but you can't tick every box when you're trying to deal with a completely unprecedented global crisis like this.
So with that in mind, if Ascot goes ahead in the appointed dates, it's going to be 5 days, 6 races a day. You're going to try and run every race, but they may not be in the order that we would expect. And all those races we've heard are going to be on ITV, which is fantastic, and hopefully garner a worldwide audience as well. Just as regards what protocols you then have to undertake in order to get this meeting to go ahead, Nick. Can you furnish us with any details of the preparations you've been taking?
Yes, well, at the moment it's very much a question of people from Ascot and people from other racecourses who are going to be involved in the first 2 or 3 weeks. It being part of the resumption of racing group, feeding into all sorts of focus groups and listening to the government advice and waiting really, waiting really for the BHA to interpret such advice and give the right give the instructions that we have to comply with. So, we've all read about broad principles like one-way systems around the track and all that sort of stuff. But the bigger and wider questions still require answers. That doesn't mean that anybody is lagging or anything. They're just trying to get the absolutely correct answer in time for resumption on the 1st of June. Apologies, and then we'll follow in from then. I mean, fortunately, if we start on the 1st of June, there'll be an awful lot of precedent set, including a significant meeting in terms of quality and runners totals and what have you, and Newmarket for the Guineas. So, we'll be learning, I imagine, from other people from the start.
If there's a glitch and we're not able to start racing on the 1st of June, does that mean Royal Ascot will be pushed back commensurate with the start date, or will it not run at all?
To be confirmed. I think we will have to work on the 1st of June resumption and then take a view if there is a delay. That question will be answered then. I think we're planning with confidence, but without arrogance, obviously the whole industry, for a June the 1st resumption. If that doesn't happen for any reason, hopefully it's not going to happen overnight, and we'll have a little bit of time to think about that. But right now we think we have as good a opening pattern as we possibly can. Reliant on starting on the 1st of June, 2nd or 3rd, I'm sure we could wing it. But that question will have to be answered if it becomes relevant.
It's quite interesting because one of the first moves was Ascot to say we're going to race on these days behind closed doors if we can, and it looks as though we're working towards a fantastic first month potentially. Needless to say, the Derby and Oaks have gone into July on the same day. What was the thinking behind resolutely keeping to your dates rather than pushing back a month?
Well, I mean, everything hangs on the Guineas and the Derby, and I think everybody accepted that from the start. They're the key generation-defining races in the country, and a adequate distance between the Guineas and the Derby and the Oaks was the sort of the ground rule principle upon which the rest of the pattern was hung. And once that sort of fell into shape, as it were, it's pretty obvious that if you move Royal Ascot out of that slot, you're going to create a huge amount of confusion post-Derby. You're looking at what happens to Eclipse, what happens to King George, what happens to Goodwood, and then into York, and then it's at the moment, and the way we're working, the programme we're working towards, it's not necessary. None of this is ideal, of course. I mean, it's not ideal that a horse that doesn't get the trip in the Derby has no opportunity to drop back against its own generation, shortly after in the St James's Palace Stakes. I mean, all these little quirks, will come to the surface as things that people have been able to rely on. They can no longer actually rely on. But in terms of the placement of the Royal Meeting, you've got to remember that Guineas Day is going to be Derby Day, and we always race after the Derby, depending whether it's a week and a half or 2.5 weeks, depending on the calendar. And plenty of horses run at Epsom on that day, in the same way as this time plenty of horses will run at Newmarket on that day and then come to Royal Ascot. So it is workable at the moment, and we're just all keeping our fingers crossed.
Nick, clearly prize money is going to be cut everywhere, we know that. What's going to be the impact on the races at Royal Ascot?
Yeah, there's going to be an impact, of course. I mean, there's going to be an impact throughout the whole year. I mean, you've seen the figures released by the Levy Board this week, reducing the amount of money that's available at the top end considerably by 50% at the top level, Group 1 level, which is something that, I think that those tracks and organisations staging Group 1 races accept, and certainly not the time to be arguing for money at the top end when there are so many issues at the bottom end, and if we can keep that sustainable for at least a period of time, although how long it can be sustainable is a worry, but I think we accept that. And of course the knock-on effect of that will be reduction in prize money for Royal Ascot, and you've seen I don't know whether it's been confirmed officially, but you've seen figures mooted for the Derby. And we'll probably be in that same sort of ballpark. We're working it through. What can I say? I mean, we haven't got crowds for Royal Ascot. Not having hospitality is a serious matter, clearly. And there'll be a knock-on effect on prize money. But that's really one of the reasons why we're so keen to get the meeting off and running as soon as we can, because, we will do our best with prize money. We'll work on that. But of course, what we are providing is future prize money in the form of money earned in the breeding sheds at a later date, black tie.
And presumably the money that you do get from Royal Ascot this year in terms of media rights money and overseas sales and so forth will then go to propping up your accounts for the remainder of the year and through the next 12 months. Is your keenness to run this fixture, Nick, indicative of a keenness to run every fixture at Ascot this year if you can?
I wouldn't say that specifically. I would be honest with you and say that beyond the King George, and with Champions Day sort of in the back of our minds, trying to get there on the same date, we certainly like to get Champions Day run on the same date. I don't think it would be anyone's plan A to have Champions Day knocked back into the winter on the all-weather, although the all-weather would be there in the event that it was absolutely necessary. But the meetings in between, with the exception of the King George, which we're already thinking about, we'll think those through in the fullness of time. I mean, the overwhelming priority, by such a massive margin, is getting Royal Ascot run. We've got a sales team who've been working flat out for weeks and weeks to make all these refunds for Royal Ascot, and no one's had a chance to really think about anything apart from the Royal meeting.
Nick, we've covered a lot of ground there. I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much, and we'll fingers crossed for June the 1st.
Thank you very much, Nick.